Welcome to my budget deck channel where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible. So if this is something you'd be interested in, then why not subscribe? Today I've had a look at Ancient Warriors. The S is very important here, and it was suggested by one of my presumably subscribers. I don't know, just someone asked and I was like, yep, I like those. So I will actually look into them, and they're not too expensive. They're also not too good in this specific sense if you don't shove lots of strong go second cards into the deck, which is usually what you would wanting to do. This version kind of requires a bit less URs, less SRs, but you need to go full on in on the stuff that you get for free. Well, not for free, but in the Master Pack bundles, which is Ash Blossom, which is Lightning Storm, which is Forbidden Droplet, and Infinite Impermanence. So these are kind of like, I don't want to say must inclusions because you can obviously run everything else, but they make this deck a lot better because if you want to play a go second deck, straight up go second deck, especially in this format, then you do need hand traps usually, unless like it's a meta where like people don't really play back row decks or people don't play like very monster spam boardy kind of heavy decks, then you can kind of build around that or build towards this. Right now, where there's basically something of everything, you have a bit of a harder time if you don't disrupt your opponent in their early plays, so they don't even get to set up a board, rather than trying to break their board, because there's so much, like with math megs and whatnot, there's so many different kinds of types of disruptions that they can put up. Some is part of their back row, some is part of their monsters, and so on, so it's not all that easy. Runic is a thing, so this is completely screwing up if you want to have any kind of fun playing against them. So it's usually quite hard to actually make a budget go second deck, but this deck can be played go first. Like, it's not terrible unless you draw like an absolutely awful hand, which can happen. This deck is known to brick a bit because it needs a few combo pieces here and there, and slight disruptions kind of annoy it a bit. If you want to focus more on the go first variant, there's some kind of cards that you can switch out. You probably do not want to max out on the one that special summons itself if your opponent controls a monster, because that usually shouldn't be happening when you go first. You could go for more stuff like Called by the Grave if you feel like hand traps screw you over, and they will. So this is one of these things. Talking about one of the important cards before we get into the card by card, one Pot of Prosperity. Yes, this is an OTK deck. Yes, Pot of Prosperity stops you from OTKing, and also Pot of Prosperity makes you cannot draw cards by card effect, which is a bit annoying for the effect of this card. Other than that, it's quite fine. The thing is, usually you want to be running Pot of Extravagance, but the big but on this one is this card, first of all, is 3 super rares, but not only this, also you do really need at least one Ancient Warrior Oath. Like, at least one is crucial for this deck, in my opinion, because it not only is a bounce, it's also a surge, and this surge is very good, especially going first, but also going second, and enables so much. You do not want to banish this. You can still try to play triple Pot of Extravagance if you want to, but then you would usually play 2 or at least 2 or 3 of this card, and you can try it out if you want to. But I didn't want to make the deck more expensive than it already is, because with this one you already have kind of 3 ultra rares that are must play. You can put them down to 2. They are searchable after all, but the thing is, you kind of want to build up a board, and this card has a good attack value. This card can pop a card in your opponent's turn, and it can special summon itself from the hand, so this is very important. Yeah, it's all in those kind of cards with this specific deck. But let's start off with the card by card Ash Blossom, because you get it somewhat for free, and most people should have one by this point, so I won't count it towards the ultra rare counter, these like bundle cards, but you can play other cards if you want to. Other hand traps that are obviously very good. Maxi is basically always good. Against some decks it's not amazing, but still usually should net you at least one draw, so it pays for itself if you want it like that. Technically you could be playing Dimensional Fissure. It will be coming in handy against stuff like T Element that will come out soonish, I assume, and it's helpful against certain other cards. Math mechs don't really love playing against this card as well, I assume. It's not going to shut them completely down, but it will make certain stuff with Super Factorial and whatnot a bit harder, at least, I assume. So there's that. It also kind of clashes with this card here, because you need to send one card from your hand or field to the graveyard, which you still can, because this card is only monster sent to the graveyard banished, but sometimes you will send a monster from your hand because you can't special summon it, or you could even get it back with Monster Reborn. So It's a bit of a give and take, but you could also still send this card, and since lots of your monsters actually send continuous spells, Dimensional Fissure is actually not terrible, especially if you want to chow down on the go first variant of this, which can be good, can not be good. Talking about the water level 4 that does stuff, is kind of what I like to call it. You can usually, like, this is your combo starter, and there's a neat combo with this card, because if this card is sent to the graveyard, then you can special summon one Ancient Warrior from your hand, and this card searches you one Ancient Warrior, so it chains exactly that way. Like, it works that way that this card triggers after this card resolves, so the card that you search to your hand, you technically then can special summon with this, so keep that in mind. That's one of the combos that basically get you any monster that you want from your deck on board, which is quite nice. And also this can work going first, this can work going second. This card is bounce when your other Ancient Warrior's monster effect is activated. This is why this deck kind of works okay with like Dark Ruler, no more. If the meta would be like, oh, big boards of monster negates, then or like of negates in monster form, then this kind of effect comes into play more. It's also somewhat okay going first, because it still triggers during your opponent's turn, and you can bounce certain stuff back if you want to clear up your opponent's board during their main phase 2 possibly, or once they've already kind of established something, and then you chain your link monster to it, then you chain you chain this card first, and then you chain that, or use the effect of this card afterwards, and yeah, you can decimate your opponent's board like that, so it's not too bad. This is a card you mainly want to be seeing, and this is why it's sad that Fire Formation Tenki is at 2. Thanks Tri Brigade, it is what it is. So this card, yeah, very, very good to have in hand. A card that I like but isn't as good is the one that it still sends a continuous spell trap to your graveyard, which can be important in this deck, and I'll get to why that is later on. It's okay. It's technically can negate monster effects if one of your Ancient Warrior monsters effect is activated. Usually doesn't matter too much unless it's like a let's take an example, like a passive kind of effect like Jinzo or something. Sometimes there's like these floodgatey kind of things in Spectral Border. Not that Spectral Border really matters to you, but well, it does matter to you actually, because it don't really go that much into extra. Like stuff like this, technically you could, but then you couldn't already activate the monster effect. So Border is a terrible example for this. But you know, lingering effects where you just want to turn them off for a turn, then this card can be helpful. But it's mainly to get you to your Ancient Warrior Saga. Saga is a good card. It's okay if you've already started your combo. It's a bit problematic, because you kind of need 2 monsters on board for this card to still work then, because then kind of if this card is already on board, then you can't normal summon anymore. So like whatever card you add with this has to be like one that's not this card, for example, unless you can send it to the graveyard then with another effect. And you have to be able to normal or special summon another Ancient Warrior monster. So sometimes you get into a bit of a, yes, you can search it, but you can't normal or special summon afterwards anymore, because you have to get this card on board as well. And if you then don't have another one to go into a link monster, also a bit problematic. So there's that. But if you send it to the graveyard, you can summon one from your hand. So it does help, but it has some kind of combo potential. It's not too bad. We run this card at 2. I thought about running it at 3 at one point. Just simply because in a go second deck it seems quite nice, because if your opponent controls more monsters, then you can send one card from your hand or field to the graveyard, basically like this card. Doesn't only have to be a continuous spell trap, and then you can special summon one Ancient Warrior from your deck, which is amazing. But you do run kind of a lot of cards that get rid of your opponent's monsters, annoyingly, and also this card is easily disruptible, and if you just normal summon this, the effect doesn't go through, then sometimes you're kind of screwed, but it's kind of the same with this card, so not really that much different. Plus it's another super rare, so I wanted to keep it as cheap as possible. You can play 3 if you have them, not usually overly necessary, but if you feel like you would want to swap them out for like swap a different card out for this one, then that card would be quite good going second. And obviously it can draw you cards, but you can only use these kind of effects once per turn, so it can only draw you 1 card, not like an infinite amount of cards when you attack, basically. Another card that most people wouldn't be playing, but since we don't pile up on these go second cards, I thought let's fill this deck maybe with some Ancient Warriors, because I felt like you break quite a lot, and sometimes you just want to normal summon a card so you can actually summon Rebellion from your hand, because this card actually needs you to have like an Ancient Warriors monster on your field. A bit annoying sometimes, so having lots of level 4s in the deck is nice. Plus this card can do things. It can send one of your spell traps, because we actually backing down a bit on the Ancient Warrior Sagas. we play this one, and the interaction of this card with this is hilarious. Because if your opponent has just one monster, you can easily trigger the effect of this card by sending it to the graveyard. And then when a card attacks, you destroy one of your opponent's cards. And then you can trigger this card's effect and just add this card back to your hand, which is a fun little loop. It's not crazy powerful, but I think it is at least a bit underrated, I would say. And if you're looking for more of a cheaper variant, then this kind of stuff it's okay. You don't have to play it, but halving your opponent's monsters can also be quite nice in an OTK deck, especially, but usually you can already bounce them or kill them, destroy them, sorry, in other kind of ways. This is a very good card because it's mainly your kind of gate to getting into Oath, because you do need a Wind Ancient Warriors monster. For some reason, the only extra deck monster they got only focuses on one of their attributes, but it is what it is. There's probably some lore behind this, and if this card is added by the effect of an Ancient Warriors card, you can special summon it, which is quite good because there's lots of ways to add this. It's a spell trap negate, which is also quite nice. Helps you go in first technically. So if you go into this card and then you search this, you already have like one bounce and one spell trap negate, so this is not all that bad. But you do need a wind monster on board for this, and the only wind monster you have other than this card is this one, and this one, and neither of them really well, this card you can't summon because it needs to be special summoned if your opponent controls a monster, and for this card you already need 2 cards on board, so it's not super easy to summon, so it's quite hard actually to not use this card for going into it, going first. But technically you have Monster Reborn as well, so this card can get back onto your board, and it's quite a nice thing. We run one Fearsome. This card is okay. It can help, and it can help in a pinch, and especially if you go in second, this card isn't terrible. If you want, you could play another level 4 if you feel like you don't have enough normal summons. This card does stuff in a grind game. It gets things back from your graveyard to your hand. Sadly, only the spell traps. It's fine. It's not amazing. It's back row removal. Sometimes you need more back row removal, and then this card could be a bit better than this one, but usually this card does a bit more because this deck actually, funny enough, kind of gets the whole battle phase thing right. It does stuff during the battle phase, but it's not like War Rock where you kind of rely super much on your battle phase. So yeah, one of his cards searchable, it's not too bad, is fine. We run triple this one because you can pop one opponent's card if they play like a monster heavier deck. You can special summon itself. It's a wind monster, so that's good. So why wouldn't we use this? This one is a bit more specific. It's technically good to extend your board state, and it's technically nice because it can clear quite a lot of your opponent's stuff, because it can attack up to 2 monsters during the battle phase. I find it funny during each battle phase, but you know, there is technically cards that can get you a second battle phase, so there's that. If you control 2 Ancient Warrior monsters, you can special summon this card, but like I said, you already need to control 2, which should be easier than it actually is. I wish some of the level 4s had effects where they could special summon themselves more from hand or do some more stuff. This is where the deck really chokes sometimes, to actually put all the monsters on board that you need. It's not as easy as it sounds like on first glance. We run 2 Kaijus. Kaijus are always good. There's lots of cards that cannot be targeted, cannot be destroyed, and then you kind of need a Kaiju for that. This card special summons itself, crazy attack value, especially if the attack is boosted by your link monster, and it can pop at least 1 card on your opponent's field, and it can trigger the effect. So when an Ancient Warriors monster's effect is triggered, then trigger some other effect. So this card all in all is quite good. Only problem with it is it cannot be normal summoned as said, and must be special summoned by hand, which is a bit annoying. So if it lands in the graveyard, if you discard it, you cannot Monster Reborn it back. 1 Raigeki, you get it for free. It's a go second deck. Raigeki's nice at OTKs. Can be problematic if your opponent's board is empty then, because then this card is dead, but you can still summon this card and hope your opponent doesn't do anything, and then Raigeki it. Still fine, still works. So not too bad. Lightning Storm, mainly for the back row. It's not actually that good against the monster lineups these days, because most stuff actually gets summoned in defense position from lots of things. So it's not as good as it used to be, but for back row heavy decks, this card can still be a game ender. Usually want to play Harpy's Feather Duster as well, but another ultra rare I did not want to include. And we have different ways to decimate floodgates and back rows, just to mention that. Already talked about this card. It's good in finding the play starters or some cards that can deal with your opponent, stuff like Kaijus, for example. This card basically searches you any level 4 in this deck that isn't Ash Blossom, for example. Saga, already talked about this, searches your stuff in specific scenarios, and in other specific scenarios it summons things from your hand. It's a good card if you draw it with one of your normal summons, and it's a very nice card if you don't have a summonable monster, and usually you lose anyway, so it's not too bad if you have it in your hand then as well. This card is a card that basically nobody plays because usually you have better cards like the whole go second shebang, but since there are lots of cards in your deck that actually want to send a continuous spell trap from your side of the field to the graveyard, this card isn't too bad because then it can add or actually place on the field this card, or technically even this card if you need it. So we have two cards that we can search with it, and the whole you can target one face-up monster and push for more game. It's not a terrible effect if you take both of them, if you take into account that both of them are playable, both of the effects do stuff. It generates you resources, it does stuff on the board, especially going second, and it's easily sent to the graveyard by one of your cards, especially by the extra deck monster as well. So I felt like this card is, in this specific variant, when you're trying to keep it cheap and trying to keep it a bit purish, then it's not as bad as it sounds on first glance, and sometimes it can actually help you out of a pinch. A lot of the time will just get you to cards that you'd rather be wanting to get at and has some kind of effect. Talk about the next card, a card that most people wouldn't be playing, but going second, especially against like floodgatey decks or like runicky kind of stuff, maybe against certain stuff that kind of grinds you out a bit or sets lots of stuff that they can't just instantly shotgun. It's not too bad because you can actually clear your opponent's board if you can't put up enough power, and you will have lots of turns where you can't put up enough power. Then this card can clear out your opponent's board, and all it needs to do is be sent to the graveyard, which either by its own effect, which, you know, 50-50 coin flip, that's how it is, or by one of your effects, so it's not too bad either. And it has the bonus effect your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to the activation of Ancient Warriors cards and effects, not just monsters, cards and effects. If you don't want to be playing this card, you could consider playing the trap card. It does summon a card from your deck, which can be nice. It stalls a bit if in a grind game. This can be not too bad, but doesn't do much going second. Forbidden Chalice, good going first, good going second. Budget card as usual. Forbidden Droplet sends stuff from the field to the graveyard. Very nice. Also a very good going second card. Same for certain permanents. Good hand trap. Good going second card. Does lots of stuff. Could run triple talent tactics as well if you like. For the extra deck, Heartland Draco, go and attack directly. If you play Zeus, very good in this deck, because we do run some small Zhuge package, mainly for the lols. Doesn't really do much, you can banish this usually, but I wanted to include it in the deck profile because of Zeus, and it would make a bit of sense at least. Diamond Crab, if you need a 3k beater and you for some reason don't have one. The Zodiac stuff does stuff. Malevolent Sins, good going second. This card can be okay going second against certain floodgate-ish decks. Certain cards that need to be destroyed on the field can help. Sophiel can bounce your Kaiju back to your hand, that's quite nice. You have Beast Warrior, so this could be spell trap removal, and you can get rid of your spells, which can be quite nice, at least quite nice. So what we obviously we want to be running this card. Searches you, bounces, attack boosts, very, very strong card. Wish it had a bit more than like 1600 attack in the end. 1900 I felt like would have maybe done a bit more, but it is what it is. Transverser, very, very nice card if you want to annoy your opponent sometimes. Deco Talker, the budget hero, Power Code Talker can come in handy, but usually not. And Raster Liger. That's cards that, well, are cheap and you would want to be playing, but the extra deck doesn't really matter in this specific deck. You can play Brotherhood of the Fire Fist, this guy. Tiger King, very nice card, can work out very, very well. You can set one fire formation spell as well directly from your deck. This is one of the cards that you definitely should be playing if you have it. Dryden is a card, especially with the Zodiacs. Zeus, very, very good because you have two ways of actually getting into it, just attacking directly. We have Nightmare Unicorn, for example, Access Code Talker, all the generic Link stuff you could be running. That's it for the deck profile. Hope you leave a like, comment, subscribe, but most importantly, I hope you have a nice day.